Thank you for joining our city's planning community conversation around the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. I am Kiva Samuel, Vice Chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission, and I will be moderating the discussion this afternoon. This is an opportunity for city staff to hear directly from residents through a panel discussion and live Q&A. Before we get started, I wanted to go over quick housekeeping items. During this conversation, our goal is to collect feedback from the community, and we will answer as many questions as we can live. Any questions or comments that we are unable to get to within the scheduled time frame will be shared following this session. When it's time for the live Q&A open discussion, please use the raise your hand feature to be called upon. Staff will keep a list of who is next to speak, and when it's your turn, we will call your name and you will be unmuted. Each person will have 1 minute to speak. You can also use the Q&A function to type questions as we move through today's event. Additionally, we will be monitoring questions on social media platforms. Now, I would like to introduce our panelist. Dave Walters. Dave Walters is Professor Emeritus of Architecture and Urban Design at UNC Charlotte, with 5 decades of experience as an architect, urban designer, and community planner. Walters has written 2 books on urban design and planning and has helped lead design teams that have won 3 national and 11 state design awards for work in communities across the southeastern United States. Amar Johnson. Amar Johnson is the president of the Seversville Community Organization and has lived in Charlotte for 15 years. Living in Seversville community for the last 6 years, he calls the area footsteps to the west of Uptown. Shannon Benz. Shannon is the executive director of the local nonprofit Sustain Charlotte that he founded in 2010 to put Charlotte on a sustainable development path that benefits our economy, environment, and equity. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from Iowa State University and a Master's of Public Administration in Environmental Science and Policy from Columbia University. In 2015, he was named one of 7 to watch by Charlotte Observer and one of the Charlotte Business Journal's 40 Under 40. In 2018, Charlotte's NPR affiliate WFAE named him one of the most powerful voices in Charlotte. Thomas Hapaparo. Thomas is a registered landscape architect and principal with Design Resource Group, a Charlotte-based landscape architecture, civil engineering, and traffic engineering firm. The firm, started in 1992, has always strived to provide creative and thoughtful design solutions that build communities and make our city a more walkable, enjoyable, and equitable place to live, work, and play. Banu Valladares. Banu is the executive director of Charlotte Bilinguals Preschool, which prepares Spanish-speaking children for success in school and life by providing superior dual language early childhood education. Banu serves on county and state level boards to give a voice to Latinx children and families, including the Regional Parent Child Plus Advisory Board, the North Carolina Governor's Early Childhood Advisory Council, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, and the Mecklenburg County Early Learning Initiative Executive Committee. Thank you all for joining us today. Equitable mobility and housing diversity are just 2 key concepts within the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and that's where we'll start this conversation today. The first 3 questions are open to all panelists who wish to respond. We will follow with an open panel discussion and close with the live Q&A. Question number 1, the city's plan proposes better connectivity and more sidewalks. It also proposes more affordable housing and more housing choices. How would implementation of these goals affect your neighborhood?
Who goes first?
Is that Dave?
Well, I was asking who goes first. I just don't want to jump in.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, here speaks the voice of white privilege. Let's get that right up front. I live in Dilworth, right? Dilworth is a model of a 10-minute neighborhood, one of the primary goals. I'm incredibly lucky to live here. I got to live here through affordable housing, because my wife and I bought a tiny condo in 1993 for $45,000. That's $50 a square foot. Unimaginable today. But back then, Dilworth was an affordable neighborhood. Today, I go out my front door and I'm looking at $1 million craftsman bungalows left and right. So we have a great physical example of a plan goal and a complete failure of other plan goals of equity and affordability. It's an all-white neighborhood, nice folks. I mean, it is both the solution and the problem wrapped up tightly together.
Thank you, David. This is Banu. So I used to live in Dilworth, and I got kicked out because of the rising costs. So now I live in Nothin, which is another 10-minute neighborhood that probably has the similar problem coming up, right? And I think that this is one of the challenges that I see with however we look at the plan. How are we going to address the equity and need? And it's not just about how we create. I really love the concept of a 10-minute neighborhood, and now I'm putting my hat on for Latinx community, and particularly the community that we serve, which is economically marginalized. Right? It's like how do we create spaces that even if you could live there, where you would feel welcome. What's the plan for that piece? So that's where I'll leave it.
Those are great comments, Banu. Thank you. Anybody else want to respond?
Well, I think the other panelists spoke very clearly and appropriately about equity. I also want to point out the aspect of the sidewalks and connectivity, because that is something that doesn't need to be just for one type of neighborhood or another. Sidewalks are a way for people to safely move around from neighborhood to neighborhood, from block to block. And there are several neighborhoods of Charlotte that do not have that kind of connectivity and safe walking space, that they don't have to walk in the streets. So that is a goal of the comp plan, to create greater safety for pedestrian networks, is also a very admirable element here to consider.
I'll just add to that kind of big picture and trying to tackle both parts of this question around housing options and better connectivity. Since our organization is concerned with all neighborhoods in Charlotte, though, I'd like to speak a little bit about how I think this will affect all neighborhoods, not just my own. I think we would all agree that having freedom of choice when it comes to how we live is one of our most sacred values as Americans. Yet, when it comes to housing and transportation in our city, like many American cities that experienced most of their population growth after World War II, we Charlotteans have very, very few choices. With regard to housing, here our choices are largely limited to either buying a detached single-family home or renting an apartment, with very few other housing choices in between. So we have the largest and typically most expensive type of housing, which are largely for sale, single-family homes, on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have apartments, which tend to be the least expensive and smallest housing choice for rent. We're largely missing the choices of housing in between that are ideal for residents who are looking to buy or rent something larger than an apartment and smaller and less expensive than a detached single-family home. And this plan strives to change that as one of its primary goals. On the transportation front, similarly, we Charlotteans have very few options, very few good options. Our city has largely been designed and built for one type of transportation. We all know what it is, the private car. Yet, like single-family homes, this is the most inefficient and expensive form of transportation, and it's not accessible to everyone. If you cannot afford a car, or too young, too old, or physically unable to drive, your only choice is to try to walk or bike in a very dangerous environment that was not designed at all for walking or biking. Or you can ride transit, which today, due to underinvestment in the system, is infrequent, unreliable, and very slow relative to driving. But again, this plan strives to change this by prioritizing a built environment designed for walking, for biking, and riding transit in numerous critical ways. And having more housing choices and more choices for how to get from home to the place that we need to go would make our living in all of our neighborhoods more affordable, more enjoyable, more beautiful. Let's not forget more fun and healthier too.
Thank you for your comment, Shannon. Amar, would you like to respond?
Yes, I agree that Charlotte does need more pedestrian-friendly ways to communicate and to travel. Having these sidewalks and these bike lanes are a way for the community to build social capital. Social capital was one of the key areas that was studied by the city of Charlotte in their upward mobility study. Essentially, the social capital will allow for individuals to communicate, to interface with each other, give them the opportunity. You can't make anyone socialize or communicate or, make a friend. But if you put them in an area that's conducive to that, which riding bikes, walking on sidewalks, parks, recreation, greenways, libraries, these 10-minute neighborhoods, community centers, everything that a comprehensive plan has outlined and designed will allow people to build social equity by having social mobility. Social mobility is the glue that makes everything work. So, yes, we do need to have more sidewalks, more pedestrian-friendly ways to travel, to communicate, just to access. We need these access points. Everyone will not own a vehicle. Everyone does not want to own a vehicle. We understand that. And so this is another avenue to cater to those needs.
Thank you so much, Amar.
Which also gets to the point that with more walkable neighborhoods, it is a natural decrease in the amount of traffic in those neighborhoods. I know that in my very walkable neighborhood, I tend to park my car when I get home from work and not use it again until the next morning and I walk to everywhere else. So, that's one of the elements of a functioning plan, is that a good multimodal transportation system really does work to decrease traffic overall.
Great points, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, and that plan also adds to equity, right? That we see communities that cannot get around because there's no connectivity. So this is something laudable of the plan, is the fact that every neighborhood is connected. And I also love that, I know that it's not necessarily connected, but the thinking around green and trees, right? Like this, the whole landscaping that goes with it, that also aims to make the space beautiful, which then includes, to Amar's point, an opportunity for people, if you're relaxed and the place is beautiful, to create more connections.
It's green. Okay. Some of the points that Amar made earlier in terms of increasing social mobility, strengthening the pedestrian experience, leads us to question number 2. Goal 5 focuses on safe and equitable mobility. Thomas and Banu, you guys just commented on this as well. Do you feel that the plan does the plan cover the diverse needs within the communities that you speak of?
Well, so we're speaking about the comp plan. So it relates a vision. It's not a full UDO that will ultimately implement that vision. So I think it started to chart the path and the vision and has stated the need for these kinds of things. So I think it's moving in the right direction, that it starts to have the conversation and start to build some kind of a basis for later plans to expand upon to make sure that it does get implemented in a way that builds on these kind of aspects.
I would just add, not everyone probably has the plan in front of them. I think it's worth stating Goal 5, the one you asked about. Goal 5 says Charlotte will provide safe and equitable mobility options for all travelers, regardless of age, income, ability, race, where they live, or how they choose to travel. An integrated system of transit, bikeways, sidewalks, shared use paths, and streets will support a sustainable, connected, prosperous, and innovative network that connects all Charlotteans to each other, jobs, housing, amenities, goods, services, and the region. Who doesn't want this? And actually, we know from city surveys that Charlotteans want more ways of getting around their city without having to get into a car. And as you can tell by this language from this goal, the plan really seeks to improve the safety and accessibility of multiple modes of transportation that, again, today are very unsafe and inconvenient to a lack of investment and prioritization, namely transit service, places to bike, places to walk. And this focus on multiple modes in the plan, again, I believe reflects the diverse needs and wants of our diverse population. Driving is not wanted or even possible for everyone, as I explained earlier. In fact, I think a mind-blowing statistic is 30% of Charlotteans do not own a car. Nearly 1/3 of this community doesn't have a car, yet we're built almost exclusively for those who do. That, by definition, is unfair. Many residents want to be able to access amenities and essential goods and services without needing to own a car, and that's so difficult to do in our city today, but many are forced to do that. And I think the other thing worth noting about this goal and this plan is that it strives to change this by emphasizing investment in those parts of our city that have not received equitable transportation investments, whether that be transit or sidewalks or bike paths, as well as those areas experiencing high growth where investment is critical now to avoid further congestion of traffic.
One of the critical issues of mobility is that you have to have a destination that is worth going to, whether you walk, cycle, rollerblade, get a scooter, get Uber, whatever. However you get there, you need a destination. And so mobility, equitable mobility is inextricably tied to community facilities. You go to the park, you go to church, you walk to school, whatever it is. Mobility and destination are intricately linked. And so, it's just, everybody's a huge fan of sidewalks, but they've got to go somewhere. They've got to lead to some destination which fulfills a purpose in our life. And that means, there's a lovely little graphic in the comp plan that illustrates the 10-minute neighborhood. It's got transit, sidewalks, it's got a bank, it's got a water tower. It's a cute little graphic. And I was talking to my colleagues in the Dilworth Community Association and said, look, that's us. We take that for granted. And in fact, if you live in Elizabeth, you can take it for, they've got their own water tower. If you live in a streetcar suburb, which were built before the automobiles, then we've got almost everything that the comp plan wants as a model, except that it's unaffordable. My little journey into Dilworth through affordable housing, that's a snapshot in time, because parts of Dilworth were almost slums in the 70s. The duplex I live in now was a site of arson by vandals, because homes were just vacant, left, right, and center. So the economic profile of places changes, but once you've got all these things that the plan wants, almost automatically property values rise, it becomes a very desirable place to live, and you're caught out in a trap that you can't get in. My wife and I look at where we live and say, We could never afford to live in Dilworth. We couldn't buy a property here today. There's nothing at $50 a square foot. So, I mean, economics do vary. I'm not suggesting we look forward to areas decaying. I'm not saying that, but there is a natural. The problem is that the market, the private market, which is wonderful in so many ways, lacks the ability to respond to this difficulty, because market pressure on good neighborhoods, new or old, inevitably raises price. I've worked with affordable housing developers for many years, to integrate affordable housing into master plans, and inevitably everything that makes a good pedestrian environment, like having your garages off the alleys so you don't have all your cars coming out over the sidewalk, which destroys the pedestrian environment, which makes it totally unsafe for children. Building economics tends to say, well, I can't afford that. Affordable housing developers say, oh, David, that's lovely, but get real. We can't afford to do the good stuff. We can't afford to do the good stuff. And these are people who really care about providing affordable housing, and they can't afford to do the good stuff. What is screwed up in our system? Now, I know, but I'm interested in other people's. I'm an old, trusty British socialist, so don't listen to me.
Thank you for the spirited exchange, Dave. Banu, let's hear a response from you.
Yeah, I love the mobility plan. I come at any plan as a with some caution, right? To think about, well, where my people consulted, where are they reflected? And if you go through the plan one by one, you bring that lens to it, and I brought that lens to it, and I felt, it's like, I'm looking for where the problem is. And the more that I looked at each aspect of the plan, the more that I realized that connectivity and different types of transportation are built in every little piece of this map. And as much as I wanted to find flaw with this, I actually loved it. I loved how, in manufacturing and in that part of the plan, there are multiple ways to get to it, right? And it's also connected to a neighborhood. I think part of what I love about the plan is that neighborhoods are connected to something else, right? There's a master plan that leads to movement between one and the other. So you can either walk between the buildings, you can get into the bus to go places, you can drive park places. I think, and for economically marginalized communities, transportation, like mentioned, right, it's one of the largest barriers. Through the pandemic, we saw that, families lost jobs. When they lost jobs, they lost their ability to feed themselves, and with that ability to do all kinds of stuff. If you cannot pay for your car repair, you cannot go to a job, and you cannot afford to have days off because you are an hourly laborer, right? And they kick you out. So it's this sort of circumstances that snowball what it's already a challenging situation. So having the opportunity for everybody to get there either on a bike or walking or transit or somewhere removes a humongous barrier. So I am very happy with this piece of the plan.
Amar.
Yes. Yeah, I'd like to chime in on that. Okay, first off, affordable housing is possible, Dave. That's just, don't put that narrative out there because that's just negative, and people who are ignorant will take it and run with it. This plan here, goal 5, with it being safe and mobile equity sidewalks and the bikes, that's terrific. One thing we haven't talked about that it addresses health, especially health in low-income communities, things that are like diabetes, hypertension, obesity. These things are needed. These are amenities needed in the underserved, underprivileged communities. If you go across town to Dilworth, if you go across town to Myers Park or Ballantyne, you'll see plenty of decent sidewalks so people can walk and be unencumbered by animals or traffic, things of that nature. Is very pleasant, very pleasant. Now, also, the goal 9 addresses retaining our identity and charm. The city will decrease the rate at which someone comes in and tears down a house. People like to use the term gentrification a lot, and they misuse it a lot. They throw it around haphazardly. It's a very nasty word. Most of the time when people are moved, it's because they are renters. They're renting. And the place they're renting from are in dilapidated, neglected maintenance properties. And so the landlords, versus them doing any work, they just set the rent at $300 or $400 or $500. They think they're doing everybody a favor when they're really not. When they do a home inspection or code enforcement come through there, they probably have to shut the place down because the maintenance has been neglected, whether it's the roof leaking or whether they got rodents infested in the property. I mean, people are living in very dire conditions that are very undesirable for the masses. The city of Charlotte is doing its part. This plan is doing its part. The city of Charlotte can't do it all. The city of Charlotte can't make employers pay their workers a decent wage. That's the federal government. Right now, you see in the news, they're lobbying for $20 minimum wage. Or $15 minimum wage. I happen to think $20 minimum wage is more appropriate. But I know we got to start somewhere. I'll take the $15 minimum wage because what's good for one individual in the city of Charlotte is good for all individuals in the city of Charlotte. We need to learn how to spread the wealth. We need to learn how to be really concerned with those who are not as fortunate. They might not have went to school and got an engineering degree or a law degree, Juris Doctor degree, or a medical degree or anything. And that's fine. Everybody doesn't have to be a lawyer, a doctor, engineer. But everybody can be a value-adding, contributing member to society. Whether you're a clerk at McDonald's or you're the president of the United States of America, you deserve a nice, fair place to stay, a clean community, and a safe community. And for me, safety is first. For a person who has a career in working in manufacturing, working with new product development, working across different organizations, different landscapes, different cultures, even on different continents, safety is always first, everything I do. So, for example, I live in the Sirius community. I've been here 6 years. When I first moved to this community, it wasn't the safest community. I didn't walk my streets at nighttime. I didn't. But now, 2021, I can honestly leave my home and walk clear across uptown Charlotte.
Thank you.
At 10 o'clock at night and come back at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not concerned about my safety.
And I really
Everyone should have.
sorry to cut you off. I don't mean to cut you off, Omar. I just want to make sure that we have time for all the questions and our live Q&A. But all of you, including you, Omar, just spoke to, in some shape, form, or fashion, what will take us to our last question. And I need for our answers to be a little bit more concise on this particular portion of the panel Q&A. When you look at Goal 2, neighborhood diversity and inclusion, what does that mean to you? And I'm going to read, to Shannon's point, I'm going to read Goal number 2. Neighborhood diversity and inclusion. Charlotte will strive for all neighborhoods to have a diversity of housing choices by increasing the presence of middle density housing. You just spoke on that, Shannon. For example, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, accessory dwelling units, and other small lot housing types. And ensuring land use regulations allow for flexibility and creation of housing within existing neighborhoods. So goal number 2, neighborhood diversity and inclusion. Looking at that goal, what does that mean to you?
I'll kick this one off if that's okay. Yeah. So goal 2, as you just explained, is about encouraging and allowing more of that missing middle housing I spoke about earlier. And this is extremely important for several reasons. I want to just mention 3 reasons or benefits of this goal very quickly. First, it will make more of our neighborhoods affordable to a wider range of residents. So right now, 84% of the land in Charlotte where we can build housing by law is limited to one type of housing, detached single-family homes on 84% of residential land. This alone dramatically limits the supply of housing to the most expensive and inefficient type, from a land use perspective, detached single-family homes. Yet, again, as we've been talking about, not everyone needs, desires, or can afford a large, expensive, detached single-family home. Single residents or couples without children often desire and need something smaller, yet there are few to no choices for them in most neighborhoods. So affordability is one of the benefits of this goal. Two, by making our neighborhoods more affordable to a larger diversity of residents, this goal will reduce the rampant segregation of our neighborhoods by race, income, and age. Right now, many of our neighborhoods are homogenous. We've all talked about that. They lack diversity in one or more categories. My neighborhood, for example, Chantilly, is almost exclusively white residents in their 30s or 40s with young children. Younger and older residents and residents without children are increasingly rare. I almost never see a person of color in my neighborhood. And that's because Chantilly is largely limited to single-family houses by law that are becoming more and more expensive, and a handful of duplexes. If more types of housing were allowed in Chantilly, residents of different incomes, ages, and races would be able to live there, and that would be a good thing for all of us. Lastly, the third benefit I'll mention of Goal 2 is that diversifying housing choices in our neighborhoods will allow more residents to live near their job or their school, which allows them to reduce their commute. The lack of choices in most of the city make it hard to live near one's job. Many people would love to live near their job or school, yet they can't afford to do so because housing is so limited. Reducing commutes saves residents time, it saves them money, and it reduces our impact on climate change and air pollution. And I think it's worth noting that in this community, tailpipe emissions from cars are the largest source of local air pollution and the largest source of emissions that are causing global climate change. So there are so many benefits to Goal 2, which is probably the most controversial goal in the plan, and it should not be. It should be the one all of us are lining up behind.
Thank you for those comments, Shannon.
I want to chime in. Somebody who became an other when I moved here. So I've been on both sides, right? I've been the majority and I've been a minority. I lived in Dilworth. That did not immediately create of the minority living in Dilworth, right? That did not immediately create an opportunity for me to connect with people. It took me 7 years to make a friend in my neighborhood until I was very pregnant. And that's when I became friends with somebody. So I think it's sort of naive to imagine that you put housing available to people in neighborhoods like Valentine and Dilworth and all of that, and that all of a sudden there's a kumbaya moment and we're all happily living together. We've seen that historically. When that has happened, what happens is white flight, and there goes the neighborhood. The prices go down, and all of that. So I love the idea of the neighborhoods where there is a range of income and accessibility, but I think a really serious thought to how do we build kinship? How do we build intentional interactions between people so that I can get to know you as a person and feel safe and trusted and welcome? And I think, so the whole plan, I think it's doing a beautiful job at leading with equity. I think that the piece that we're going to have to keep in mind, top of mind, is how do we design with communities as opposed to shove different types of housing in different neighborhoods that will create more separation than, how are we intentional about this? Is I think the way that we're going to be able to solve the problem. I know that for our families that feel completely neglected, the rhetoric is anti-immigrant, all of that, it is really difficult to say, hey, there's a home now in Chantilly, let's go move over there, right? It needs to be more of how do we do the opposite? How do we bring more of the majority into the margins, right? And how do we design from the margins out? How do we define from, and what is, so anyway, so I can rant in this space all day, but I think that that's going to be the place for me. You know, I look at the plan and I also think about what happens to the day laborer. Where is that person in this map? Where do they live? It's just such a beautiful plan, but I don't see how the person that has to room with 5 other people in an apartment to be able to make enough money to send back home is represented in any of these neighborhoods. And so, again, how do we create those spaces for designing with and creating a intentional opportunities for developing kinship, so that we shift that mentality that the other is somebody less than me and somebody I can't learn from, but that actually, when I interact with you who are different from me, I am actually fully transformed. That would be the icing on this map.
Interesting comments, Banu. Thank you. David, I'm going to come to you in just a second. I just want to remind those attending the event to continue to post questions in the chat. Go ahead, David.
Right. Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Like many of us, I spend a lot of my time with my head buried in the practicalities of trying to get stuff done, that I have to remind myself to come up for air and think about ideals. My ideal for neighborhood diversity and inclusion is I walk down the street and I look at the homes, apartments, single family, whatever, and I cannot tell the economic level of the people who live inside. That's an ideal. And why I react strongly about the affordable housing issue is that I know from decades of experience that things get pared away in order to make it affordable, of course. So you can immediately tell in neighborhoods, oh, that's affordable housing. And that's where the stigmatization starts in our biased society. So my ideal is that you walk down a street or a block and the housing does not reveal the income status of the occupants. Briefly, in Davidson, North Carolina, when we had inclusionary zoning and developers were required to have a 12.5%, there's one development in particular behind St. Albans Church, if anybody knows it, that 12.5% of the duplexes, the terrace houses, are affordable. But you cannot tell from the outside. You cannot say, oh, that's affordable. Someone less wealthy lives there. You can't play the social stigma game, because from the outside, it looks identical. Inside, of course, the kitchen units are cheaper, the bathroom fittings are cheaper. You make the obvious economies. So that's my ideal. And I know that's so difficult. And that Davidson success was whipped away by the state legislature. That inclusionary zoning, doing that stuff that Davidson did. And Davidson is a very privileged community. We get that. But that doesn't stop privileged people doing good stuff when they can. And the fact that you didn't know who lived in what house, how much money they made, I think is a bedrock principle of an integrated community.
Thank you for those comments, Dave. Thank you guys so much for the spirited engagement. I appreciate it. Before we go to a live Q&A where we will have our panelists answer some questions, I'm going to recognize a few of our elected council members and elected officials. Mayor Wiles has joined this event today, and I just wanted her to have the opportunity to say a quick hello. She's still on with us.
Thank you for the participation, the opportunity to hear this dialogue. We need more of this engagement, more consensus gathering around these types of engagements. And the most important thing for me now is that we have to have some kind of idea of who we're going to be as we continue to grow. We've worked on this for a very long time. So the question that I have is, what will work for us long term? And where is the community ready to accept? And one of those things that we have so much information or disinformation, that we need to clarify those things, but do it in an expedited way that doesn't slow us down or make us position us so that we're not able to actually work and change before the growth comes. So I say I have a sense of urgency, but I also have a sense that we need to engage and educate in some areas. But I also believe, what I've been told by many, there's a lot of good stuff in this work, and what can we do that affirms that work? So thank you very much for the discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Eitel, good afternoon.
Hi, everybody. It's been a really interesting conversation. I really love what Banu said about that the plan is a great start with equity, and there's a lot of good stuff in here, but it's about creating intentional interactions between people and building kinship. Really, that's been a really big takeaway for me on this. So thank you for the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Eggleston, are you still with us? Would you like to take a quick second to say hello?
Sure. Hey, I appreciate the opportunity. I won't try to turn on my camera much to my friend Shannon Ben's chagrin. I am in my single occupant vehicle right now, but wanted to listen in and appreciate all the conversation and all the folks who've dialed in to be a part of the conversation. There are a lot of great things in this plan, and I think there is some work to do before we have a final draft, but I think we've got I think we're at a great point right now, and we need to hear more from the community. We're hearing, I think, from a lot of folks who love it or hate it, but I think there's a lot of folks out there who realize that it's built on a strong foundation and might simply need a few tweaks. And I think we need to hear from those folks who can bring a more nuanced, can give us more nuanced feedback on it. So I appreciate everybody who's been involved and will be involved, and y'all for pulling this together.
Thank you, Councilmember Eggleston. Councilmember Phipps, are you still with us? Would you like to say hello?
Yes, I'm still here, and this is my second forum this morning on this topic, and it's been good in both instances. I liked what Mr. Walters said about walking down the street and not realizing the economic status of your neighbor, because you can build affordable housing in such a way as to not give away those kind of credentials. But I'm reminded of several developers that came into Charlotte from out of town, from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I had mentioned to them they were building a market rate multifamily project in Northeast Charlotte. And I said, hey, look, can you put some affordable units in here? And they said, of course, oh yeah, because they came from a jurisdiction that had inclusionary zoning in it. So they didn't see anything wrong with, they thought that, hey, this is a no-brainer. We'd be glad to do it. So they integrated several affordable housing units into their multifamily market rate project. And of course, you couldn't tell. I mean, because, from outward appearance, the building looks like, a luxury apartment complex. But there goes it speaks to the culture of, I guess, what developers and states are doing in order to promote what we're trying to do here in this plan. So I'm excited about it. I've been working with this, with this plan for a while, and I'm just hoping that we won't get bogged down into the intricacies of, just nitpicky stuff, and get to the whole, that's what we want to do, and look at the broader picture of what we're trying to achieve. So I thank you for this forum. I mean, there'll be many more forums coming up, and I hope to be a part of all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Phipps. Councilmember Driggs, are you still with us? Mr. Driggs was with us earlier. Maybe he had to drop off to get to another appointment. Thank you.
I'm here. I didn't realize I had to unmute.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Driggs.
I'm unlike Councilmember Phipps, who was in his single occupant car. I'm here in my single family home, and I have turned my video on. Very interested to hear the discussion today, and appreciated some of the comments that Professor Walters made. I'd love to talk with you offline sometime. As somebody with a background in economics, I have concerns about the workability of some aspects of the plan, and I think in particular the kind of clash between all of our aspirations and the desire to keep housing costs down. So I want to make sure that by the time we finally adopt this plan, we have addressed the issue of how we're going to keep costs down and also make all the improvements we're talking about. But I think this is great for us to have an ambitious plan. We need to address the issues that affect our city today. So I'm looking forward to the continuing of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Driggs. Thank you to Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Eggleston, and Phipps. We will now begin our live Q&A. As you all may or may not know, we have some staff members here who will assist the panel in addressing some questions, and I believe the first question is for staff. Our Assistant City Manager and Planning Director, Taiwo Jayoba, is
Thank you.
a member of our panel here, and this first question goes to you. The plan includes a number of policies such as impact fees, mandatory inclusionary zoning, and community benefit agreements. Has legal counsel reviewed these policies in order to ensure they are compliant with North Carolina law?
Thank you very much for that question. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We do know that the subject of impact fees and mandatory inclusionary housing, it's definitely clearly spelled out. The subject, of course, that I think you may be talking about is the community benefit agreement, which is really a new tool. But again, as we look forward into the future, we have to explore opportunities for different funding tools. And so the attorney is definitely researching those, looking at what's allowable legislatively, what can be done, whether legislatively, locally, or statewide. And so, yes, they are. But I will also say that 20 years into the future is a long time. There were a lot of things that we did not imagine will happen 10 years ago, and here we are today. Those things are taking place. As planners, we have to think long-term, long-range, both funding-wise and growth-wise and development-wise, and that's just the job that we do. And part of that is looking at different possibilities and potentials of what may not be doable today, definitely be doable in some years' time. So yes, they are looking at those for us, researching their legal framework, and that's why we have to have them in the plan so that we don't have to revise this plan every year. We plan to revise the plan every 5 years, and so maybe there are things that we will continue to take out and put back in and just making sure that they conform with where we're going as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Taiwo. We have a live question from Michael Groover.
Yes. Part of the, I live in South Charlotte, and, I see a lot of the plan and a lot of the discussions, focused around, as someone put it, 10-minute walking areas. But, there's areas all around Charlotte that are, Tuckasegee Road, Westinghouse Boulevard. I live on Pineville Matthews Road down in South Charlotte. And, as much as we would like to be able to hop on our bikes and ride into downtown, or as much as we'd like to be able to walk on a path all the way downtown, it's just not feasible from those areas. We're miles out. Especially, if we're going to go to Lowe's, we're not going to carry 250 pounds of cinder blocks home on our bicycles, or on the light rail. That's just not workable. So one of the things that has contributed to kind of a balkanization of neighborhoods is not enforcing policies equitably from neighborhood to neighborhood, which excludes certain people from one neighborhood and allows other people into those neighborhoods. An example is parking. If you go to anywhere in South Charlotte or Tuckasegee Road or Westinghouse Boulevard or North Charlotte or any of the two malls, which are both in the outskirts of town, there's plenty, ample, free parking. But there is not in the downtown areas, in Noda, in Dilworth, in those areas. As these areas change, one of the things that we stop enforcing is the rules and regulations and ordinances requiring the businesses and developments to provide parking so that people from other areas in town can come. And much of this is reflected in what we see in predatory towing policies, ordinances about booting and vehicle retention. And I would like to suggest that we consider in our plan, in this plan, making Charlotte, converting Charlotte to free parking from one border of Charlotte to the other, all through the city, and eliminating paid parking. I have a plan of points that I've provided in the Facebook message stream there if you want to look at the details. And I'd be happy to go over them if you have time, but I'll cut my question short at that. This question is for the elected officials, some of the people doing the planning, and the people in that group.
Thank you for your question, Michael. I would say that if you have provided comments in Facebook, I would also encourage you to submit your comments at charlottefuture2040.com so that your comments are properly recorded. And staff will be able to properly address those questions and comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dave, I think this next question might be fit for you. It's from one of our social media platforms. Goal 5 also includes crime prevention through environmental design. Is this really equitable design?
I used to have a whole semester course on exactly that because it is a really fascinating and interesting topic. CPTED, the shorthand version, has a lot of common sense in it because essentially it says public areas, in order to be safe, need to be informally supervised by the people who live and work there. So if something bad looks as if it's going to happen, people can see it, they can report it, they can intervene. It's basically it's all about equitable public space so that folks feel safe, and that is the exact opposite of the car-dominated society that we just heard about, where cars own every single piece of space. That has got to change. Crime prevention through environmental design is all about the pedestrian space, making it supervised, making it safe. People overlook it. They can see, oh, I haven't seen Mrs. Smith for a while. I wonder if she's okay. And they knock on the door. That kind of neighborliness is prompted by the design of space. If we all just back out of our cars, of our double garage, and zoom away, our neighborhood becomes very, very, very unsafe. So I could not disagree more with the last, participant. And if we want a safe place, it's got to be safe for pedestrians first, second, and third.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Shannon, I think you mentioned this in one of the responses you gave. This also is from one of our social media platforms. What data supports the increase in affordability with the elimination of single-family only zoning?
Oh, I think the data is widespread, but you can look at the most basic principle of economics, which is supply and demand. The more supply you have of something relative to demand, the lower the price. So when you cap the supply of, in this case, housing, and demand is strong and growing every day, as it is in Charlotte, you're going to have a price increase. Anyone who's ever taken Economics 101 knows that, and even folks who haven't taken Economics 101. So I think there's a basic law of supply and demand that comes into play here. But there's also been numerous studies on this issue that can be found quickly with a Google search.
Thank you, Shannon. This question is for Deputy Director Planning Allison. Craig, are you with us?
I'm here.
Thank you. Is there any thought for conducting an economic impact analysis in order to obtain data on how the adoption of the comp plan would impact the local economy?
Sure. So we've done a fiscal impact analysis of the overall plan and looking at what the proposed growth patterns would be, which would be more compact development, like in their 10-minute neighborhoods, and found that just the cost of service from fire and police is less, and so it's fiscally beneficial for the city to develop in this way. However, the 2040 plan is an aspirational document of what we've heard Charlotte wants to be and what we want to look like over the next 20 years. And as Ty mentioned earlier, it talks about things that may not be allowed today or that may take time to achieve. And so it's not really the appropriate document to do a true economic impact analysis. What we've done when we did the transit-oriented development, we did do an economic analysis there where we looked at dimensional standards and specific sites and case studies, and really looked at what the economic impact might be or even benefit would be to those types of case studies. And we are planning to do that as part of the Unified Development Ordinance later on this year. So that work will be done, and I think it's more appropriately done with our Unified Development Ordinance.
Thank you, Allison. This next comment, I'm going to get thoughts from Amar and Thomas. This is from one of our social media platforms. As you consider the impact of these recommendations or consider delaying them, please remember that there is already an impact of not changing. Displacement is happening now. Even if changes only impact partially, that is better than no change. Amar, what comment would you have in response to that?
Change is happening in the Charlotte area. May not be happening in communities that we want to see it happen in. I think the one thing we got to realize with this plan is that the plan is part of it, but it's on the city council to approve or disapprove zoning. When the Charlotte City Council approves bad products, it's a threat to development all around the city of Charlotte. I don't want to see affordable housing being saturated on the west side of Charlotte or in the Seversville community. Back in October, City of Charlotte, the Charlotte City Council approved the Stewart Creek Greenway project. You might be familiar with it. It's that non-vehicular project where it violates the city's current building codes of the height and doesn't protect the tree canopy and other policies, procedures that the city already has established. The city council chose to go directly against that. They put parking in jeopardy for all of the residents in the Seversville community. It's just a bad product. It had no market data analysis to support it. It's terrible. So they're right. Development is happening, and we can't. This comprehensive plan is attempting to control that, steer in the right direction. But ultimately, it comes down to city council approving these zoning projects. And for the residents, we have to hold them accountable. We hold them accountable by voting them in office or out of office. Next time election time comes up and a bad project has been approved for your neighborhood, you remember who that city council member person was. And if you like what they did, then you continue to vote for them. If you do not like what they did, then you do not vote for them. You choose a candidate who's aligned with your views and who's going to do the right thing by the city of Charlotte and promote upward mobility. And that's what we have to do. That's what it comes down to, because these developers are going to do what they can get away with. They're going to do what the city of Charlotte allows them to do. All right? Whether they use opportunity zoning money, which is a predatory method, as far as I'm concerned, they classify the whole west side of Charlotte as opportunity zone. Opportunity zone, by definition for the government, is low income and economically depressed areas. The Seversville community is not a low income and not an economically depressed area. 6 years ago it was, but not now. Currently, right now, today, 2021, it's not. It's absolutely asinine for that project have been approved. So the residents do have to be concerned and be cognizant of development happening in their communities, in their areas. Do pay attention to the petition numbers that come out, and do speak your piece when it's time to have a hearing.
Thank you, Amar. Thomas, what would you reply? I'll reread the comment. As you consider the impact of these recommendations or consider delaying them, please remember that there is already an impact of not changing. Displacement is happening now, even if changes only impact partially, that is better than no change. How would you respond to that comment?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of gets at what's going on here in Charlotte. It's a very high demand place. Lots of people are wanting to live here. And one of the city's goals needs to be, how can we get them to fit into our fabric while maintaining the fabric that we already have and making what we have better. So I think, the fact that we're all spending so much time working on the comp plan and these other ordinances shows that we're aware of the fact that there's an incredible amount of demand and we have to find a place for all these people. So, we keep working on that. Meanwhile, development doesn't stop. It's rolling forward. City council has booked up months in advance for rezoning petitions. So work keeps going forward, but we need to keep our nose to the grindstone to make sure that the larger global plan that charts the path forward is also going forward. So I think it's necessary for both paths to keep going, keep going the development that is allowed by the ordinance now, but using that information and everything else that's going on to inform the comp plan and the UDO that's going forward to make sure that the places that we're building for ourselves is a long-term best solution for everyone. So just keep working at it.
Thank you, Thomas. Mr. Jayoba, has the real estate community and development community been engaged in the planning and development process of this plan in order to ensure there is economic development buy-in for future development?
Yeah, I'll ask for permission for both Alison and I to actually answer this one. So I'll start. Yes, right from the very start. If you will notice, I don't know if you will go back, and this story is really on the website. We started the comprehensive plan fall of 2018, but 6 months prior, I was pretty much going everywhere trying to engage everyone as to what should it look like and what would they expect, and worked very well with former executive director of REBIC, Joe Padilla, over many meetings and presentations to them. But they were not the only one. I also went to the Black Realty Association as well to make sure that we were keeping everyone in track. NAIOP, commercial real estate development. So yes, probably met with the development sector more times than I met with any other group, I would say, because I believe that a planner's best position is to be a facilitator between those who build the community and those who use the end product. And so it was very important for me to engage them. Now, does it mean that everything that they proposed or suggested were necessarily filtered and taken? Not necessarily, because we have to balance some of those things together with what the community envisions and values. But again, like I will always say, there's still a lot of room for comments on the draft plan. And as we look forward into the future, it's really about coming up with a plan that benefits our community at the end of the day. That, to me, a planner's primary goal, again, is to be a custodian of public interest. And that's very important for us to continue to keep that at the forefront of our mind. So we continue to engage with them, even as recently as this month, and we will continue to do that going forward. So I'll pitch it to Alison because she's also done quite a few engagement directly with REBIC and NAIOP.
Sure. Thanks, Ty. Yes, I think there have been representatives from the development community and many, many other sectors from the very beginning. I think using their own words, they would like greater participation, but I think that's the same way with a lot of people. I think there's probably a lot of people on this call that while this has been going on for a while, maybe there's just other priorities in your life and you haven't had an opportunity to engage. And so this is why we create these community conversations, is to provide additional places and opportunities for dialogue and to hear your thoughts. So I think this is a great forum, and I appreciate everyone's comments that are coming through and on social media as well as in this Q&A.
Thank you, Tywell and Allison. We'll take a live question now. And this one is going to be from Afia. Afia, are you still with us? Okay, we'll come back. Tywell, the next one is for you. Is there anything the city can do to incentivize developers to build housing with middle-of-the-road features that would cost less than $3 per square foot to rent?
You know, that's a very tough question because it's very detailed. One thing that we don't want to do as planners is to prescribe what developers should do, and we need to be very careful with that. We can set policy framework, but at the end of the day, this is their top, this is their space, and we can help and do that. So let me answer this in two ways. Without the comprehensive plan, there are things we can do to incentivize our developers today if we want to. We can expedite the rezoning process to save them time. In a place where we've had today that we do not have mandatory inclusionary housing, we've got to find ways to incentivize developers to do the right things. And there are a lot of developers who actually want to do that. I mean, they talk to us regularly, whether it's for rent or for sale. And so that's one. We could reimburse fees, for example, so that way they can build at a lower cost per square foot than they do today. So that's one. We can do that today without a plan. We just need to have the framework within our current approach to be able to allow that to happen. The second part of the question goes to the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, in goal number 3, we did propose there that 10% of the housing trust fund can be dedicated towards home ownership in vulnerable communities. I know we can do that today, but can we propose this as part of the plan, or maybe even to take that higher? And that's a way of really making sure that we protect vulnerable residents from being displaced. Because obviously, if you own your townhome or your duplex, you're likely going to stay in the community. Or if you're a renter and you feel that you belong, then you participate in uplifting that environment. So there are things we can do today, but the plan, what it does is to solidify what we can do today, while also helping us to map a path forward as to how we can help developers do this job of not only providing missing middle housing, but homes that are affordable to seniors and to millennials, and really much to our veterans and fire officers as well as police officers. It's not going to be an easy thing, and it's not going to be one strategy, but there are things we can do outside the plan and within the plan to incentivize developers to build for sale and for rent at affordable rates.
Thank you, Tywell. And that leads us to our next question. I'm going to direct this into Thomas. We want to hear from you on this. What guarantee do we have that developers won't continue to build unaffordable housing as they currently are with the new apartments and townhomes that aren't affordable today?
Okay, yeah, that's a tough one. You really put me on the spot with that one. Just for the record, I'm not a developer, so I can't really speak to what they're going to do. But ultimately, it comes down to supply, right? The main reason that it's so incredibly expensive in Charlotte is there's so much demand and so little supply. And that's supply all the way from, mansions on one side of town all the way to, very affordable houses on the other side of town, and everything in between. And as long as there's not enough supply, you're always going to have increased costs because the demand is just so high. And the cost of taxpayers is also very high too, because if you don't allow density to occur closer to the center, you just push all that demand outwards to the city. So you have all that public infrastructure costs. It also has significant traffic impacts. I remember a rezoning case once where someone wanted to rezone density on Park Road at a certain point. And everyone said, no, we don't want to do that here. That'll bring too much traffic. So then they just rezoned a little bit further down the road. And those same people drove through their neighborhood. So allowing density to occur, in these areas will increase the amount of supply that's there, which decreases costs. Part of the reason that Charlotte's so expensive and why there is not a variety of housing costs is because more dense product has not historically been built here. Once product ages, that's when it becomes affordable. It's always very expensive to build something new. But after you have the inventory in place over a couple generations or a couple decades, that becomes more and more affordable, and it provides that full range of housing types. So part of it's just Charlotte's catching up, that we really don't have that kind of existing infrastructure to kind of accommodate some of those price points that everyone's looking for. So hopefully you don't feel like I dodged the question. I kind of gave as much information as that I could.
Not at all. Thank you, Thomas. Very insightful. David, is it responsible for the city to approve the 2040 plan? How will vulnerable communities be protected if state laws don't change or if the private sector isn't willing to foot the bill?
Well, I could pretend to be King Solomon and have wisdom enough to solve that, but you'll have to make do with me. The short answer is, with the tools we have, vulnerable communities cannot be adequately protected. That is observable fact. Now, that there are good, players with good agency involved in many redevelopment issues, but the market is always going to look to buy cheap and sell high. That's a basic principle of American capitalism. And so the issue becomes a really, really hot political potato, because in order to generate genuine affordability across a wide range of the community, the basic operation of the market has to be refined, altered by selective government action. Now, from where I come in Europe, that's like normal. No one would get pilloried for saying that. Here, it's a dangerous thing to say. People say that's socialism. And of course it is not. The government acts to intervene in the housing market every day by zoning. What we've got to do, though, is to be bolder. We've got to build the difficult relationships with state legislators who don't think like we do. And we've got to bring as many tools as we can to incentivize the developers who want to do the right thing, to encourage other developers to join that chorus. And we do that by, essentially it's the old thing. It's a carrot and stick. There's incentive and some, if you go against the community agenda, if a developer is actively working against a community agenda, then that project or that agenda does not deserve to succeed. It demands very, very tough council action. It demands not dodging. Well, we can't ask a developer to put in affordable housing. It breaks his pro forma. That pro forma is not sacrosanct. It's predicated on making a certain profit. There's no God-ordained rule that says you have to have that amount of profit. So, unfortunately, we tend to give in far too early. And I cringe when I hear elected officials just give in to, what the developer, we can't interfere with what the developer wants. Yes, we can. We have a social agenda. We are not going to move this city forward by continually apologizing for some activities of some developers.
Thank you, Dave.
Hope you're listening, elected officials.
Thank you for sharing, Dave. I want to go back and give Afia an opportunity to voice her comment or question.
Hello, this is Afia. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I had a little trouble. Well, first of all, thank you all, panelists and attendees. So I'm a native Charlottean, and I'm a resident of Hickory Grove, the area. It's a culturally diverse community in East Charlotte, and I was born and raised there as a child and left for close to 15 years and returned to find that there was very little that had changed, at least aesthetically, over that time frame. And I'd like to know what our community and other communities like it can do to attract really the specific form of investment or development that gives us access to higher quality resources and choices. So in terms of things like healthy eating alternatives or upper scale shopping opportunities and other resources that can kind of just help us with our interests while still preserving the cultural integrity of the community. And I know that Mr. Johnson, he brought up an idea that was more of kind of a reactive solution, but I was curious about some of the things that we can, as a community, do a bit more proactively to kind of draw that interest.
Yes. So yes, you speak about wanting not to have a food desert, or you want to have an upscale grocery store like a Harris Teeter versus, say, an Aldi's, right? Something like that. Or, you know, you want these nice amenities. I think that we all do, you know. One thing I think you can do progressively is, you know, you have a neighborhood organization, do voice of opinion, start there. Then once you do that, have the leader of your neighborhood organization contact your council member in your district and the at-large member. Also reach out to the county commissioner of your district and at-large. Then see what kind of group that they can put together, because they're going to have the contact, they're going to have the communication, they're going to have the resources to reach these available executive directors of development, right? And see if it's feasible. One thing a lot of these companies do, whether it's a Target or a Lowe's, they do their market data analysis, and they look and see if they have the demand. Everybody's been talking about supply and demand, and supply and demand is very real here in Charlotte, with the job growth and the median salaries that come to these areas. Developers can build these nice products. Like, look down South Boulevard, right? You know, 5 years ago, none of that was there. Once that light rail got there, everything started going up. Take that for example. People looked at the Harris Teeter, the Lowe's. I go to an Alverson Way all the time, and I go to the Harris Teeter on South Boulevard. I love it. They look to see if they got residents who can actually financially support it. Do they make enough money? And do they have a quantity of people? I mean, I don't know what the numbers they're looking for. I don't know if they need to say, like, they need to have, like, maybe 100,000 people in a square mile that make, say, $75,000 or more. I'm not sure what their criteria is. But all you can do is do your part. Do form your neighborhood organizations. Do join one if you don't have one. I mean, if you have one, join it. Reach out to your district leaders, your council members, your commissioners at large. Devise a plan. They'll have these interest groups, and they will be the ones that can really direct you and let you know the feasibility of attracting those amenities to you. That's pretty much what we did here at actually Seversville, where I live. Development first came grassroots a little bit. We had it was a high vacant rate in the neighborhood. Then there became a high occupancy rate where private developers came in. They saw the demand, and so they built some new homes on vacant lots. Some they tore down, and they were already basically vacant, and they built these nice products. People moved in and bought them, and now what we're just starting to see in 6 years, we're starting to see that other small restaurants that come in by, and they're doing very well because they have people over here in the Seversville community that are probably making a median income of $150,000, right? We're doing really good. So that's what I would say. Just try to join your neighborhood organizations, reach out to your council members, reach out to your commissioners, and start there.
Thank you, Amar. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I would like to remind, as we begin to close today's community conversation, remember that any questions or comments that we were unable to get to within this time frame will be shared following this session. We thank everyone who attended today. These were some great questions and comments. Continue to submit your feedback to charlottefuture2040.com. Additional opportunities to engage and have your voice heard include listening sessions and a virtual open house that's available 24/7 to explore and provide comments on the plan. Details for the listening sessions and the virtual open house can also be found at charlottefuture2040.com. That's CLTFUTURE2040.com. Also, take the opportunity to visit charlottenc.gov for more information on how to participate in the public comment session on March 22nd. As we close, I would like to thank all of our panelists for participating and close with the final question in one sentence. Describe what you hope this plan will achieve once it's adopted. We'll begin with you, Banu.
Equity.
Thank you. Shannon?
More choices that will allow everyone to have an opportunity to live the life they choose to live.
Dave?
Everybody can walk out of their front door, say hi to their neighbors, and go about their business without even thinking about owning a car.
Amar?
I hope that this plan achieves upward mobility for all Charlotte residents. And in doing so, it must address diversity, access, inclusion, and equality.
Last but certainly not least, Thomas.
Thanks for that, Supervisor. I'm going to keep it simple. Walkability, connectivity, equity, and most importantly, community. That's what we're all striving to build.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you to everyone who took time to join us today, and we hope that you will continue to actively engage in this process. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.